We are so excited to have Rachel Wolan joining us this episode. Rachel launched her first AI product 10 years ago. That's 10 years before AI was hot. And since then has been the VP and GM at Dropbox and is now the Chief Product Officer at Webflow, which serves 3.5 million teams and is the next generation web experience platform. Since then, Webflow has launched 3 AI products more recently, the AI Site Builder, the AI Assistant, and Webflow Optimize. So they have a wealth of experience in supercharging their product teams to go after their AI opportunities and go and execute on them. So excited for this episode. Rachel, I am so excited to have you in AI Product Kitchen.
I am so thrilled to be here, Matt.
One thing I'm really fascinated about you is you have been in the AI space for over 10 years now. I think it was at Talkdesk 10 years ago you launched your first AI product. Now you've launched multiple AI products at Webflow. Give us a lens into what this journey was like for you and what has actually changed in building in AI.
Yeah, I love this question because I think, in some ways everything has changed and in other ways like nothing has changed. And so I would say, the first thing that hasn't changed is you still have to solve a customer problem. And at the end of the day, AI is just a new development superpower. And obviously it's 10xing the speed at which we can, kind of produce that solution. But, we're really in where I started a decade ago, we were very focused, obviously, on building what I would describe more as like ML-based products, where you had to provide a truth set. We actually launched a platform at Talkdesk, and we're exposing, like CSAT data and transcripts, and different third-party partners were building apps on top of our ecosystem, and basically training on our transcripts and using that true set of CSAT data. And now we're in a place where, I think that it's more like kind of stochastic, right? And so you're kind of like predicting what the outcome should be or what it could be. And, you're not necessarily like providing that same true set, but I have a feeling we're going to get to a place as we start to really niche down in a lot of the models where you can build really interesting products, and you'll probably use like a mix of different types of models and methodologies and, RAG and prompting, and ultimately we'll do different things with inference and different techniques. So I feel like we just have like a wide variety of different types of products that we can now build. And I think generative I look at as just like a completely different set of skills that are, these superpowers, and you can kind of like think about them like, what problem am I actually trying to solve? And then you now just have, let's say previously you maybe had like a paring knife and a chef's knife, since we're in the kitchen, right? Now I kind of see the knives over here. Now you maybe have like a whole rack of knives that you can pull out, and you have like that sushi knife, and you have like kind of the fish boning knife and all those things. So that's the way I would think about it.
I love that. You've been very conscious about saying you're going to lead the AI movement in the web experience at Webflow. And I want to ask, how do you differentiate between when you should lead in the AI space versus follow other people?
First, we haven't always led. And I think in places where you're not the first to market, whatever you release at that moment in time, you feel like it needs to be the best in market. And so, we just launched a new AI website builder. We certainly weren't the first to market, but it was an opportunity for us to show what is possible and how you can differentiate. But then I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot of opportunities, especially when you're adding a second and third and fourth product, to see, like for example, how in our case, we ended up acquiring a company called Optimize that is an AI optimized product. And so in the case of Webflow, we had websites, we had a website builder, we had a CMS, a content management system. But you kind of go from like building the website to managing the content, and then the next thing you want to do once you get it live is optimize for conversion. And we were kind of missing that piece. And we could have just said, hey, let's build or buy a product that is kind of a more traditional optimization product. And instead we said, what does it look like in this new world that we're living in, and how do we really like help increase the pace of experimentation that our customers have through AI? And so I think when you're moving into a new space, there's a huge opportunity to really be like, what is that AI native solution? And again, you're typically adding, maybe a new business model to your business, or maybe you're disrupting someone else. And so I think that's where I see, a lot of times in your core product, you're enhancing with AI. And when you're going and moving into new markets, you are creating a, new AI native experience.
We'll come back to AI and how you've invested in that at Webflow. But if we reflect back on Webflow's journey as a whole, and you think about the initial product, which was a site builder, you launched a site builder in an array of maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of other competitors in the space, and you cut through the noise, which is so impressive. And so I want to understand, like, what were the key factors in helping you cut through that? And then when did you know it was the right time to launch that second product and actually go multi-product?
Do you ever know exactly when to launch the product? It's a great question. So first, I would say I would give huge kudos to our founders, Brian and Sergi, who really kind of led the vision for what we wanted to do from an AI site builder standpoint. And I think really our goal was to lower the barrier to launching a bespoke professional website. And that was the bar that we set. And so as we started to, discover what that meant and really think through, well, what does it mean to be bespoke? What does it mean to be professional? What does it mean to drop someone in who, maybe they were able to get through that initial experience, but then Webflow, is kind of like a power tool. And so how do we kind of think through that whole journey? And then, really think through what, how do we have to kind of shift that first time user experience to make people successful? And then when we started thinking about what does it mean to launch a new product like this into what you said, a very crowded space, we did a lot of benchmarking with other products in the space. And we're really trying to think through, what would you get from from a template creator, for example, which is, I think, maybe the alternative, and really think through how do you try to take that experience and, allow someone who maybe doesn't have a strong design skill set to create something really bespoke. And so the way that we really thought about it was starting to do a lot of human curation and AI enhancement of our product. And so we kind of have created this experience that we think generates something really beautiful and unique every single time. And I probably used it, 50 times last week. And I got totally different experiences every single time. And so I think that level of experimentation, being able to get this really unique website in, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, that is so much more attuned to what you might get from, probably not the equivalent of if you hire an agency, but what is very difficult to get from any other website builder. We really feel like we set a new benchmark.
Talk us through your first AI product. When did you know it was the right time to invest in it? And I want to understand what went into that. Did you have the people internally to upskill? Did you have to look to external talent? What did building that first AI team actually look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really been a journey for us. I think it started before my time at Webflow. So I've been at Webflow for a little over a year. And, I think we originally started and said, hey, we want to have a AI builder that is a junior designer. And that was the bar that we set. And that's a tough bar to hit. But, I think part of that is you need to have that experience on your team of who's a designer, who's a web designer. And so, we actually decided to bring Sergi, one of our design co-founders, into that project as a result. And then we also started to really build out what we call our applied AI team. And they're kind of a mix of different skill sets of people who've built lots of different types of AI products in the past. And some have built products on top of LLMs, some have built more ML-based products. And so, we've kind of navigated our way to having very little, kind of talent on board. And as soon as we actually, each person that we've kind of put into place has increased the velocity. We brought on an AI principal product leader onto my team a few months ago. And I can just see how other product managers are learning from working with him. And then we've brought on a number of designers who have experience building AI products. And again, each time you kind of bring in somebody, they also are sharing knowledge across the team. And, so I would say that's kind of one thing is talent is the foundation. And, I think the second is every single product manager needs to kind of learn, every single designer, every single engineer needs to learn the skill set of how and when and why to use AI to power features and when not to. But I think that there's, skill sets that we're talking about today, like how to use eval tools, for example. This is a totally different skill set. How to do all kinds of prompt engineering. How are you prompting to prototype? All of these different things that a year ago we were not talking about. And so that is the pace of change is so wild today in that skill set. And I think we're really at this place where in some ways you might spike in a skill set. I think about it as like the T-shaped like EPD person almost. You might spike as an engineer, but now you might be generating a PRD in Cursor first, and then you're starting to build out that product. Or you might be working at a design system, and then you're able to kind of use that design system to generate a prototype just off of a PRD as a designer, right? So I think there's same goes with product manager, where you can go and like build that prototype without a designer. So I think there's like this interesting convergence of skill sets, and it also is like changing the product development lifecycle, and we don't exactly know what that's going to look like. And I think it's creating some like very interesting opportunities, and even like opportunities to kind of question what you already understand.
If we start with the talent and how you're upskilling your teams, what are some really practical things you have done to actually upskill Gen AI fluency?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I mean, we're doing brown bags across EPD. I think of insights as a core part of our team. So today we just did like an AI brown bag and are bringing in speakers from all across the industry. The second thing that we're doing is a lot of what I call cat fooding. So using all kinds of AI products for builders, using all kinds of AI products internally, trying to not discourage use, but also really think through, what are we giving to models? How do we do this in a responsible way? We did a couple of kind of internal hackathons on our AI site builder, so that we were, everybody was on that product, and we were doing load testing, and we did a course across my entire organization with Maven that was like an AI product management course. So I think it's kind of a mix of different things. And what I think has also been really helpful is we've really tried to think about how do we platformize AI so that any team can build AI products. And so a lot of that, for example, when we built the AI site builder, we needed to be able to do image generation. So we brought in a model to do image generation, and now that model is exposed to the platform, we can use it in other parts of our product suite.
So imagine I'm a CPO and I'm trying to figure out like, where should I invest in AI? Maybe it's customers pulling me, maybe it's a first mover advantage from a competitive landscape. And I'm just trying to figure it all out. Like, where should I invest? How should I think about trade-offs? Where should I pull talent from? Like, how would you think about this from first principles?
It's a great question. I don't know that you can just pull somebody off the street that has never built AI products before. But I would look for people who had probably built out AI products in a previous generation in your space. So they have some understanding of the customer problem. They have some understanding of, previous types of models that you could use. And then there's kind of like a nice blend of skill sets that you can draw on. Because I think that at the end of the day, as a product leader, you're really just trying to understand that customer problem, and then make sure that you're building the right thing at the right time for the right person, and making sure that's like in their workflow.
You mentioned parts of the software lifecycle are blowing up. Like, what do you think has blown up already? And if you were to make some predictions, like, where do you think we're going in terms of how we actually will build and grow products in the future?
Yeah, this is so hard to predict at this point in time. I'll say like a couple of things that I've seen as trends. I think the first is that everyone is really responsible for QA. So I was just at dinner with somebody last night, decent sized product team. He's like, QA is everyone's responsibility. If you go and talk to me or our CTO, we are really thoughtful about QA for every single team. Is every team kind of has to know their own product, and that's their responsibility. I think that will also be heavily augmented by AI, and in particular agents. So if you think about what an agent can do, and you look at some of the newer experiences, like what Operator's doing, for example, it is an agent clicking around an interface, and it's only really been accessible to consumers to date. But you can imagine a world where that is a very useful tool set, and there's a bunch of different startups that are also starting to address that space. And when you have like really complicated products, or where there's like a lot of arcane knowledge about how to use that product, I think that is like ripe for innovation. And also like, you're just seeing, you'll probably see QA cycles go so much faster and surface problems faster. It's almost like, unit testing is getting completely blown up right now. And then I would say there's a whole new skill set of being able to prompt engineer, right? And that's half of someone who's building an AI product, that's half of their job, is being able to prompt the model to get the thing out that you want. And so, and if you kind of think about what they're actually doing, that is design. So when you're doing prompt engineering as a PM, that is design. And then design might end up being doing QA on that generation, right? So I think that there's just, lanes that we thought were so discrete in the past, I think are becoming less and less discrete.
Has this changed how you've thought about structuring your product organization or teams?
I think it's changed how, and I think, quite frankly, we're in the midst of trying to figure out what that looks like. It's changed how I think about, how quickly we can get signal. I think that I don't expect my product teams to be, using like 6 AI engineers on the side yet. I don't know when that is going to be a reality. I don't expect a full-fledged prototype coming out of my design team or my product team yet. But, I think there are parts of the process right now that could be, we could be running alpha tests much faster as we're working on the product, and you might end up having things working in parallel. So I think that there are parts of the process that we'll start to experiment with.
What does Signal look like for you? Can you give an example of like a real project or AI product?
So we use UX, which is a score to determine if a product is usable. It's kind of like a widely used score across the industry. We could go and have a prototype that we're running and getting like very good, that someone is actually using, and we're getting good signal on and maybe we have like a stubbed out database or something. So I think that's like one example. I think another example might be you kind of today, the way you determine what your database schema is, you like have a design and then a product manager writes a spec and then that gets handed over to an engineer and that ends up, turning into a set of objects and file, whatever. I think you could actually have AI kind of like generate that data model for you, generate some synthetic data, start to really like run usability tests against it. You could kind of go out into the future and imagine doing like fully unmoderated usability tests. And then you have your user researchers working on things that are like much, higher value and more strategic. Because I think a lot of times right now, if you just, took a look at what an average PM, product designer, usability researcher, the kinds of questions I see come into our data science channel, like I bet half of those things could actually be done in a different way. And then you just end up spending your time doing something completely different.
Every opportunity ends up being a trade-off, right? So we have like core experiences, we have our emerging products, now we have AI as a core part of that. How do you think about the ROI of investing in AI?
Yeah, think about it similarly and differently. So I think, again, it always has to solve a core problem for your end user in a probably 10x better way. And if it doesn't, it's probably not like the most effective implementation of AI. I think we've all been a little bit timid sometimes, like being like, is this AI? Is it not AI? Being like very explicit, this is AI and it's generating. And I think, in the future, when we think about ROI, I think we'll end up getting to a place where it's much more of an outcome-based ROI. And you're, thinking about how do I drive, in our case, let's say a conversion. How do I drive a conversion much more efficiently using AI? And then you're going, again, I think it like is almost going back to, the days of ML where you have like an outcome that you're trying to orient against. And, I think that when I think about the ROI, it's can I get to that outcome 10x faster? Because that's going to make it so that my customers realize that value faster, and ultimately I am able to drive more and more adoption of my product.
Who really inspires you in the AI space? Do you look up to any companies, any people, anything that you truly follow in terms of inspiration?
It's a great question. I mean, Ilya's pretty inspiring. I was just starting to watch, I think that's how you say his name, Andrej Karpathy's video about how he uses models. Like, I find a lot of people that, like, I love Andrew Ng. I feel like he's a true educator. I find people who not only understand the space, but think about the responsibility of the space and educating in the space are really inspiring, because I think that there's so much misinformation and there's so much opportunity. And I think that sometimes with that fear, you end up creating, a world where people are like, well, that's not like my problem yet. And so I think the people who really truly understand the technology and are very involved in the foundational model training, as well as kind of a lot of the ancillary spaces around agents. I just feel like they really have the best understanding of what is possible and where we're at in this point in time. So I think that those are the people that really inspire me.
You've been really big on AI augmenting the human, not replacing the human. And I think there's been some fascinating different paths we've seen in AI space where, let's just take code generation. You see tools like Devon who have gone down the replace and become the engineer. And then you see tools like Cursor who have gone down the augment the engineer and be by your side, actually giving you superpowers and 10xing you, as you put it. How do you think about bringing the human in the loop, and where does that fit into how you build products at Webflow?
Yeah, so I mean, we use all kinds of code gen products for parts of our process. And I think today, you can't really get out of the human in the loop. But I think that there's a lot of root things that you still do in building software, like unit tests, for example. I think that that's kind of the most obvious place where you're going to see more augmentation and eventually probably some automation. I think that as you start to think about the safety of the governance of code and data inside of larger companies, I think you're going to see where some of those harder limits end up getting placed against some of the more agentic products like Devon. And I don't know that we've completely kind of hit those limits yet. Or maybe we have. Again, I don't know that but when I look at, I talk to some of our customers and I've spent some time with some really innovative CIOs, it's very obvious to me that this is going to be just a complete, I think that augmentation might mean replacement, or it might mean that you're augmenting what, whereas today you can maybe be 1.5 times as productive. Tomorrow you might be 10 times as effective or 100 times as effective. You might have, but you're still, kind of identifying the problem and trying to have an opinion about how you solve that problem.
100%. What about designing experiences? And I think the phrase you use is homogenization of design. And I think the risk is if you allow AI to generate something, everyone generates the same thing. Where does the human creativity, intuition come into that? And so I think what Webflow's done is a really good job at allowing them to complement each other. You generate a site builder is the most recent product you launched, and then you apply your own controls on top to adjust it, change colors, change background, and really inject the human creativity. How do you think about those going hand in hand as you build and design AI experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in a few different ways. I think that taste is going to be more and more important. It's really difficult to define taste, but you know it when you see it. That is going to be more and more important the further we get into this AI journey together. And then being able to, I think the best platforms will figure out how to both augment you and inject your own taste in a way that feels really authentic to the end user.
Webflow nailed the actual go-to-market for the SMB sector, and now you're layering over enterprise, which I find fascinating. Take me on this journey of how you've thought about go-to-market and particularly merging the actual product-led and sales-led motions as you've scaled.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we had a real blessing of tapping into a kind of like like a market where people I don't even know are aware of the problem space. And I just huge credit to Vlad, Sergey, and Bryant for seeing this opportunity and seizing it, and really putting something into the world that gave our customers developer superpowers. And so, Webflow being a website builder platform, we really focused on how do we give those developer superpowers to less technical people. They're not completely non-technical, right? I think it's a very sophisticated product that is really abstracting code in a lot of ways. And so we really focused on how do we give a product to, let's call it designers, that looks and feels like a product that they're comfortable in for designing user experience, but then also focuses on how do you actually get to production, right? And so as we started to move up market, that I think oftentimes you build for that end user, and it's a single player environment, and then you kind of move to a multiplayer environment where they're collaborating with someone. And so in our case, oftentimes they were collaborating with an agency. So an agency would go and build their website, and then they would kind of go back and forth and eventually kind of take it over. And they'd have a very small team that's working on the website. Now we've gotten to a place, as we've brought on more and more enterprise customers, that they really wanted a design system. This is something we really think about and have invested in a lot over the last couple of years. And they wanted to build something that was repeatable, because they didn't just want to go and build that one-off website for their conference, for example. But they also wanted to lay out their brand design system. And then, so I kind of call those more kind of the presence sites. And then as they saw the power and the speed at which they could actually build out their brand experiences, they would go and bring us and say, hey, we really want this to be the platform that we use for our main revenue driving website, right? And so that was kind of our evolution. So if you kind of think about that, that requires a collaboration toolkit, where you may have multiple teams that are building using the same brand. And so that, but a lot of times that was mostly designers. And then about 5 years ago, we introduced a CMS, and that started to bring in a content marketer. So now you have varying skill sets around that brand design. So you have to think about what guardrails are you going to put into place. And now we have, we have growth marketers coming in, because we have Optimize and Analyze. And so now you have, multiple teams that are collaborating on the same web toolkit, let's call it, the web design system. You have multiple websites, and ultimately you want to have an administration around that. And so again, it's your collaboration footprint is growing and growing, but you also want guardrails, because all of a sudden you have somebody who has maybe no web experience that could be publishing, and you want to still have control over what's going out. You may have your IT admin wants to know who is who is building the website. It's your most important brand asset. It's the front door of your business, and you drive so much of your revenue through it. So the stakes kind of keep going up and up, and then you want to have both control and scale and flexibility to collaborate. And so those are very different products almost, but they're all built on the same foundation of that brand design system, websites, and then ultimately kind of a collaboration set. And then you start to think about AI as being part of that. And it could be AI as augmentation. You'll probably eventually have places where AI is a teammate. You want to think about when you invite that teammate in and when you don't, and it's a different set of permissions you might even give to an AI teammate. And so I think that we have I think about it as we've built the foundation to enable collaboration across humans, and now you're going to have AI coming in and collaborating with you. So yeah, I don't know if that totally answered your question, but hopefully it gives you a sense of how I think about it.
It does. When did you start to think about when enterprise should be layered on top of that? And how do you really start to get that seamless between the self-serve adoption and then some of the enterprise capabilities coming on top?
Yeah. So in general, we really think about those collaboration capabilities as one of the axes for why you would want to buy our enterprise product. And I think that being able to do things like SSO into Webflow, that is a signal that you're a bigger team and you want to make it easier for people to log in, but you want to kind of monitor that authentication. So there are kind of like certain signals that we look for. And then I think the other piece is really, again, it's that scale. We try to not actually limit too much on scale, but there are if you have 20 different websites that you all want to have talk to each other, there is kind of like some aspect of scale there, but we definitely don't try to like limit how much traffic you can get. That to me is something that everybody should be able to achieve, no matter what you need from a collaboration point. I think security is is something we think about a lot. So kind of going back to that SSO example, again, you want to really understand who is using your site, how are they accessing your company data. That's obviously incredibly important. And then I think the last piece is really around control. So we have capabilities where you can like branch a page and a couple of people can work on that page, and then in order to merge it back into the main branch, you have to sometimes have approvals. So really, those are kind of features where, again, the higher the stakes your website is. If you're like a Fortune 500 company, we have a number of Fortune 500 companies that are customers. They just have like a different level of expectation. You might need to share it with legal. You might need to have 4 different people on the marketing team give approval on copy. You might need to have, any number. You might have a designer. You might have like an art director. You might have an SEO agency that's working with you, and you might have a design agency that's working with you. So you start to see like what that collaboration in web looks like, and the more complex that gets, the more it's just like a very obvious. You want that. We try to kind of gate on functionality that we think is indicative of what kind of business you are and what kind of goals you have.
How does this change how your product teams prioritize? You have a bunch of different personas now, which is so amazing, but I imagine different needs a lot of the time or jobs to be done. And then within that, you have different sizes of organizations, different tiers, different functionalities. How's this changed in terms of like strategy or product prioritization?
Yeah, it's super fun. I mean, I also kind of think back to what I had to do at Dropbox, because very similar type of problem where I was building for a consumer. I was building for a small team. And then we also had companies like Facebook that were our customer. And it was kind of everything in between. You had like 100,000 person customer and like, some individual that downloaded it on iOS, right? And so I think you first need to understand what is like kind of the core job to be done. In our case, at Dropbox, it was uploading a file and sharing it. And in the case, like the backup had to be bulletproof no matter who you were. And one of the value props we had was actually that when you shared a file, it felt like a consumer experience and it was very easy to understand. And so it made it very easy to share inside and outside of your organization. And then so take that to like Webflow. We want to make sure that anybody who wants to build a bespoke professional website has that toolkit at their disposal. No matter if you are like someone that's very early in your startup journey, or if you're, a Dropbox of the world, also one of our customers. So I think about how do we make sure that same person is having a very similar experience. And the other reason why that's really important is, I think Dropbox and Webflow also kind of share this unique characteristic where we both have kind of hybrid users. You might start using Webflow to build your personal site, and then you take it into your business. And that was kind of the same with Dropbox. You might start backing up your personal files and sharing with your accountant, or you might back up your photos, and then be like, actually, I want to send a video at work, and I want to send it to somebody outside, and make that experience really easy. So I think that really thinking through and understanding, the lifetime journey of your customer is super important. And then ultimately, like a lot of those customers grow up on your platform and they get bigger, and you want to make sure you've, that you can kind of grow with them as they grow.
You talk a lot about the concept of PM as GM, and I find that really interesting. And what it actually reminded me of is Ben Horowitz in Hard Thing About Hard Things, PM as a mini CEO. Is this the same thing or is this different? Like, how would you describe PM as GM?
Yeah, that was obviously like a foundational article for a lot of us back in the day. And I think about PM as GM as thinking really, I think that CEO, I think that ended up getting taken out of context in a lot of ways. And I mean, I've never talked to Ben about this, but I'd love to someday. And, you know, I think what's fascinating is it doesn't mean that I think when I think about what PM as GM means, it means that you think through every single facet of the company, and you think about your product, and you think about what would have to be true in order for this product to be, you know, successfully supported, for example, in order for our education team to have the right information to teach our customers how to use our product, in order for our marketers to understand what audience we're trying to address with this, and then come up with the right, you know, go-to-market plan. In order for, like, so I think that there's, you know, writing a spec is one thing, executing well on the product is another thing, and then ensuring the success of your product by being that translator across many, many different functions that's that PM as GM.
Have you found any success in hiring PMs from a lot of these adjacent functions? Like, where do you see a lot of your PMs come from in terms of like even go-to-market, support, success?
I think it depends on the product itself sometimes. So I've definitely brought in PMs from customer success. That's like a very natural adjacency. There's someone on my team right now who started as a customer success rep at the beginning of her career. I've definitely hired people from engineering that were very technically minded, and maybe they wanted to work on a more technical product. I've hired designers and helped them transition. You know, I also think that I've had great success having data scientists that I think are working on like a very like growth-oriented product. Again, I think a lot of times it's like when I talk to people who are kind of thinking about a little bit earlier stage in their career, and then thinking about how they transition from one function to another, the thing that I often recommend is trying to do it at the same company. That's like the easiest way, because you don't have to learn a new set of orgs to navigate. And, you know, like we have somebody who came from support who is on my PM team right now. But I think the second thing is don't change industry if you're going to try to make that transition, because you have to kind of bring something to the table that is valuable. And then the third thing is try to really think about there's so many different kinds of PM products right now. There are so many different types of products that you could PM rather. And so how is your skill set going to translate to that product that you're trying to PM? Because that is how successful you end up being as a PM.
What's something that's really surprised you in building an AI?
I mean, I think just how fast the models have evolved is like wild. Every day, practically, I wake up and there's some new model innovation from a different company. And I think that has been really, I think you sort of like heard from people like Sam Altman, this is going to be the reality in, you know, like 6 months or a year. But I think that like keeping up with that pace and what is possible, and just continuing to try out like many, many different products. I mean, I was saying to someone yesterday that I have, I think, 7 different products that I'm on subscription to, and that I'm using on like a semi-regular basis.
Anything you can share?
Oh yeah, I mean, I pay for Perplexity, I pay for OpenAI. I was paying for the more expensive version for a while and kind of testing it out. I've paid for a number of different coding products. I mean, I just am like rabid, like cat fooding lots of different products to understand. I think that the user experience of AI is actually very hard. And if you kind of go and look at all the things that are hidden in OpenAI, it's very hard to understand what is even possible today and at what price point. And, you know, it's really difficult I almost think about it as like the progressive disclosure of a product is very different than the progressive disclosure of an AI product, where you're not only disclosing the user experience itself and like if there's a new capability, but what the model is capable of.
What keeps you up at night about AI?
I mean, I think that it's the same thing that gets me really excited to get out of bed. I think that what is possible today, we don't even know what's possible today. I think we're just starting to put some of these newer models like through the paces. And, you know, I think it keeps me up that someone's going to innovate faster than we will. That always keeps me up. But that also motivates me because I think that there's just so much opportunity and really understanding what you are great at and how you integrate the superpowers of AI into your products and really understanding like what is your unique value prop that like no one else is capable of doing. Like I think that's like, it's just like such a fun time to be a builder.
If you reflect on Webflow's users and try and look forward 5 years from now, what's something they are doing today that will seem so obviously archaic?
Yeah, I love this question. I think there's a couple of things that they're doing today that to me are going to end up just being so much easier with AI. The first is, you know, we have a lot of people that still like write JavaScript in our product. And I think that that is very clearly something that is getting disrupted and is a lot easier today to do with, you know, the variety of code gen products that are out there. But I think that that workflow is going to be easier and easier over time. The second thing that I think people are doing today, but is going to change dramatically, is really around, I mean, I think content creation is really, you know, if you kind of think about what AI models today are good at, they're good at writing code and they're good at generating copy. I think they're okay at image gen. I think they're okay at video gen. And so those are probably two places that we'll see a lot of innovation over the coming years. So if we think 5 years out in the future, there's going to just be so much, you know, today we're talking about the wrappers around code gen products. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the wrappers around image and video gen products.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been so fun to jam with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. I appreciate it.